welcome to SciLux, the podcast where we talk about scientific developments and technological changes in Luxembourg. And in today's show, we start the second season of our podcast, and we have a very special guest. So this season is going to also include some interviews with scientists working in Luxembourg, and the first scientist I managed to invite is Dr. Guy Fagherazzi, who works at the Luxembourg Institute of Health. He is the director of the Department of Population Health, and he's going to tell us a little bit more about the project that he works on, which is called CoLive Voice. He will be also telling about other research developments and webinar organized by LIH. In case you're listening to this podcast a few weeks later, the webinar he talks about is on the 30th of November, and you can find out the details about the previous and following webinars on the LIH website. Of course, as usual, I'm going to share all the details and the things that we discussed in our show notes. And you can also count on me reminding you about important data and links at the end of this podcast in case you get interested only later on. But now on to my guest. First of all, thank you very much for coming today and for joining me to discuss a little bit your research and what you're doing. What I would like to start with is if you could tell us something more about CoLive Voice.
Yeah, absolutely. I can tell you a bit more about CoLive Voice. CoLive Voice is an international research initiative that has been launched by the Luxembourg Institute of Health and my group. And basically, it's an international screening platform to identify what we call vocal biomarkers. And I can define what vocal biomarkers in a second. But basically, we are trying to collect clinical and health information on a lot of participants coming from all around the world, and also recording their voice with 5 standardized voice recordings. And we try to use voice features to see how we can better monitor health in these participants.
Okay, how is the collection going?
The collection is very simple. You have a direct link on the web that you can follow. You can access it from your smartphone, your tablet, or a laptop with a microphone. Basically, you can read the informed consent, you can consent to participate, and then you have a few questions to answer on your health, your individual characteristics, the treatments you may take, or the drugs you have, and the disease you can have as well. And then you will have to perform 5 different voice recordings. You can have to read a pre-specified text that lasts about 25 to 30 seconds. You have to say as long as possible in one single breath. You have to count from 1 to 20, and you have to breathe in and breathe out 3 times and cough 3 times as well. And these recordings are then processed with AI approaches to identify vocal biomarkers.
So that's pretty clear, but of course I have a lot of questions on that. So first of all, why are you collecting different samples? So I've read that sometimes it can be just the voice or sometimes some pre-prepared text. So what's the reason for that?
Actually, we are using some specific voice recordings for specific research question and other for other research question. When we want to tackle some very important symptoms, such as, let's say, fatigue or pain that we would like to monitor throughout voice, usually we can work with the pre-specified text, which is a very good resource to identify vocal biomarkers for monitoring fatigue, for instance, and also the as long as possible. These are good voice recordings for that. For other purposes, for instance, when you want to work on respiratory syndromes, the cough, of course, is really helpful for that. So we are trying to collect these different recordings, and then we tackle different research questions. And depending on the research question, we are using more one or the other voice recording type.
So this means that you are not focusing only on one disease in this study.
Absolutely. CoLive Voice is very general. We are looking at the health of the population in general, but we have some focuses of interest still. We are very much interested in working to monitor the health of people with cancer, people with diabetes, people with COVID-19, and people with any mental health issues such as stress, anxiety, depression. And we are starting now, it's the next step, to look at neurodegenerative disorders, such as Parkinson's disease. We are also looking at people with multiple sclerosis. But Now, the most important research we are currently doing is focused on COVID-19, cancer, and diabetes.
Okay, so COVID-19 came at the right moment in a way, because, or did you start before or during, or what was the story here?
Actually, CoLive Voice is a follow-up project, and the first step we took regarding vocal biomarkers was for COVID-19. Actually, we designed at the very beginning of the pandemic in Luxembourg a cohort study that is called PrediCovid, where we record voice in people who have been infected by SARS-CoV-2, and we used voice to detect signals that can be helpful for monitoring symptoms in people with COVID-19. And this was the starting point of this research activity. And now that we have a strong expertise, we have methodology to do so, we are extending our research activities to other outcomes than COVID-19.
You also mentioned Parkinson's disease, but isn't that one of the diseases that is more researched from the vocal standpoint?
Absolutely. The voice and vocal biomarker research field comes from the field of neurodegenerative disorders. Already 20 years ago, there was some researcher listening to people with Parkinson's disease and their voice to see how the disease evolves over time and to see how throughout voice changes, we can better monitor people with Parkinson's disease. So now what we try to do is, thanks to the increasing and easy access to voice recording we have with digital technologies, we are trying to expand this research field to other outcomes to help people with other conditions than just Parkinson's or Alzheimer's disease.
Okay, I understand. I also know that you specialized in diabetes research. Is that also part of the CoLive Voice?
Absolutely. My main background is in the field of people with type 1 and type 2 diabetes. And we are very much interested in this group of people because, for instance, what we can see in people with type 1 diabetes is that they frequently experience what we call diabetes distress, which is a strong burden of managing the disease on a daily basis. And it's sometimes difficult to identify, to detect diabetes distress and to monitor if someone is improving or declining in terms of his or her distress. So we are using voice to identify vocal biomarkers of diabetes distress. This is one of the current research activities we have. The other diabetes-related project is to detect hypoglycemia thanks to voice, to see if we can easily prevent in the future some hypoglycemia events in people with diabetes.
So it's not just diabetes, it's more about the hypoglycemia and distress. You can't just record voice and know, okay, this person has, I don't know, a declining situation in that or whatever.
We are also in another project related to CoLive Voice. We are trying to use the CoLive Voice data to see if we can detect and have a screening tool of diabetes, whether we can predict if someone has or has not diabetes just on voice. But at the moment, we have just preliminary results, so I cannot really comment on this, but I can just say that it's very promising. We have very good first results on that because it seems that people with diabetes have different voice signatures than the general population. So we might someday have something to create a detection tool or screening tool for people with diabetes.
That's good news for sure. I'll be keeping my fingers crossed for that. But when it comes to just collecting the voice, are you finding it easy or difficult for participants to record themselves?
It's really easy now to collect voice because what we want to do is monitor health in the real life. So we want to rely on existing technologies that everybody can access to. And most of the participants of CoLive Voice are using directly their smartphones or their tablets to record voice. And it's very intuitive.
Yes, that I understand. But just to, what I mean is finding people to actually participate. How is that going? Because what I would say maybe as a layman is that especially for the diabetes type 2, it would be probably older people who most probably are not, on Twitter or whatever, just to check out and then participate voluntarily to record their voices. Mm-hmm. So that's what I'm interested in.
Of course, recruiting, our objective is to recruit up to 50,000 participants in the next 5 years all over the world. So it's very ambitious. We are just at the beginning now. We have just a few months of data collection behind us. And what we can see is that we really have to communicate a lot about voice because someone with diabetes was not really familiar with the concept of vocal biomarkers, might just not understand why these researchers are interested in voice. How can it be helpful for me to manage my disease on a daily basis. They might not understand directly. So we have to really communicate about and simplify also how it can be used. So this is the biggest challenge we are facing at the moment. But still, we have quite interesting results in terms of participation rate. We have good results. Now we have already been able to collect a few hundreds of participants from all over the world. And this is very good. We have people from America, from Australia, from Africa, from Asia, and they are all willing to donate voice to move this field forward. So this is really exciting.
That is perfect. And of course, we are in Luxembourg, so that question has to appear as well. What about the language? Because whenever you have research, it's like, okay, yes, I want to participate, but what about the language?
The language is a key determinant in the field of vocal biomarker, of course, because the voice features might change according to the languages, according to the accents, but also according to the age of the patients or the gender, for instance. All of these factors may have an impact on our findings. So that's why we need to go international from scratch. We cannot just rely on one language, for instance, because we want to be as inclusive as possible and to make sure that the vocal biomarkers we are developing are applicable for everybody. So Luxembourg is a very good place to start because we can already work with multiple languages, and we have in the context of COVID-19, for instance, we have been able to identify vocal biomarkers for monitoring the symptomatic status of people with COVID-19. And this works very well, regardless of whether the person is speaking French, German, Luxembourgish, Portuguese, or English. So this is really exciting. We can see that there are some voice features that are language independent or disease or gender independent. And this is what is really hopeful for us.
So going deeper into the voice recording itself, what I want to understand again from a layman perspective is, let's say you focus on one disease, let's say Parkinson's. Parkinson's, I guess, will be easier, right? Because the degeneration of voice is more noticeable. So you collect the samples and you try to look for patterns. That's what you do on the basis of the AI that helps you find the patterns. Is that how it works, or?
Yeah. The different steps are as follows. Basically, we collect voice and we have the raw audio signal from each people, and we have two groups: people with and without the disease, or with or without the symptom of interest. So let's say Parkinson. Then the audio signal, from the audio signal, we extract almost 6,000 audio features from the raw signals. And all of these variables, these 6,000 features, we include this into an AI model to predict whether someone has or has not Parkinson, or whether the disease evolves over time. This is one option. The second option is to convert the audio signals into an image, and we call this a spectrogram. And then we feed AI models and deep learning algorithms with these images to predict the clinical or health outcomes of interest. So this is how it works.
So there are two different possibilities. And what does it depend on which one you use? Or you do it parallelly?
We do it in parallel. We test both. And at some point, we combine them also to improve the accuracy of the different prediction models we have. So it really depends. We test them systematically, and we see what's the best strategy for the given outcome of interest.
Talking of outcomes, can you already tell something about, for example, from the pre-COVID results, how successful you were with that?
Yeah, the best example I can give you is the 3 current papers we are currently publishing. The first outcome of interest is monitoring the symptomatic status of someone with COVID-19 or someone with long COVID. We can monitor just with 25 seconds of voice recordings, and we can predict if someone still has symptoms or if he or she is asymptomatic. This is very helpful for the future. Let's imagine that we can include these vocal biomarkers into rehabilitation programs for people with long COVID. They still have very impairing symptoms after 1 year since the infection, and they enter rehabilitation programs. Thanks to voice, we can really see the progress or the decline of the different symptoms thanks to the rehabilitation program. So this is how we want to help patients. We want to include this in clinical practice, in telemonitoring solutions. So this is an example. The other two I have in mind is for monitoring fatigue in people with COVID-19 and long COVID. It's the most frequent symptoms in people with long COVID. And we have very good results. We have accuracies for the AI models up to 85 to 90%. So this is really encouraging. And the last one, which is the most surprising for me, was we can predict the loss of taste and smell based on voice. And this is
very surprising. You're right. And how?
Yeah, this was unexpected, and I cannot really understand why. We have some hypotheses from a physiological point of view, but we could not imagine at the beginning that we could predict that good with that level of accuracy the loss of taste and smell in people with COVID-19. So this is also a project we are trying to publish now, and we have also very good results for that.
Moving on, as you know, I hope that you've listened to our podcast before. We always have this part where we are asking a pub quiz style question. So I have actually an idea for the question, but if you have also something we could ask our listeners that we will reveal later on, would be great.
Yeah, I have one also. I have an idea. I've mentioned diabetes distress, and people with diabetes, they have to take an impossible number of decisions every day to manage their disease properly. And we could ask to the following question: how many decisions per day a person with diabetes has to take for managing his or her diabetes? And I don't know if you want me to say the answer now, but the answer is
no. I will ask you later on. Okay. So there is a little
fine.
bit. I have less editing in the podcast if you answer, and I'm very happy because I know the answer. Okay, so good. I would be one of the people who could answer the question, and I hope there are more, and we will of course reveal that later. My idea of a question was actually something I should have asked you in the very beginning. What are biomarkers? Because that's the word you are using so much, vocal biomarkers as such. But we can reveal it now. And I'm sorry for the problems. This is my daughter who is sick, unfortunately, and not happy to be in the other room.
So basically, biomarkers are a very traditional word we hear very frequently in health and medical research. Let's imagine that the vocal biomarker is just an extension of a traditional biomarker. A biomarker, let's think about your cholesterol level, the glycemia level. These are biomarkers that can help you monitor. They give you insights about a specific condition, a specific health status, and it has to be validated. It has to be reproducible. And for that, this defines what a biomarker is. And now, if you want to transfer this definition into the field of digital biomarkers and vocal biomarkers, this is the exact same characteristics. A vocal biomarker has to be reproducible, has to be validated, and it has to indicate a specific outcome or a specific symptom in a certain population, like patients with diabetes, with cancer, whatever.
But this is still new research, right? So can we already talk about validated vocal biomarkers?
We are in the process of validating a few vocal biomarkers, but the difficulty we have and the challenges we have is that there are not many databases and data sets we can use to validate externally our findings, because we are just a few labs in the world working on vocal biomarkers for the moment. So there are not a lot of data and resources we could tap in to validate in another context our findings. So this is the main challenge we have for the moment, but the field is growing very rapidly, and I'm very sure that in the next 5 years, we will have more data to work with, and we will see the first clinical practice applications of vocal biomarkers.
What about digital biomarkers? What's the difference between vocal and digital?
Digital biomarkers is broader. Vocal biomarkers is a subgroup of digital biomarkers. You can have also other digital biomarkers that can rely not on voice, but let's say, for instance, data from connected devices or from smartphones that can indicate a specific state. Let's talk about the most basic information is the number of steps per day you can take, and this is an information you have in your smartphone. This could be considered somehow as a digital biomarker, and vocal biomarkers is just a subgroup of that.
Could we also say that these digital biomarkers are collected by all these big companies nowadays to also tell a bit more about us, or that's a different field?
The interest of collecting voice for marketing or commercial purposes is also increasing. That's true. But we have to be very careful to not confuse what we are doing with what big companies are doing with voice. Basically, we want to engage patients with their healthcare and the health monitoring on a daily basis thanks to voice. It will still be, for now, an active choice of the patient to record the voice for monitoring his or her own health. We are not going to passively collect and record and analyze voice without the consent of the patient. So this is very different from what the other big companies not in the healthcare system could do with voice.
And I'm glad you mentioned that, right? Because I guess nowadays maybe some people would not want to participate because of these concerns, right? We are already getting a bit panicky about who collects what and for what purpose.
Voice is a very sensitive data and source of information. So all the people in the population might not want to share voice if they don't understand how we can directly benefit from this voice recording. So we have to also educate a lot and explain in a very transparent manner how we are processing voice, how we are collecting the data, and how they could benefit to better understand themselves, to better follow their diseases, thanks to just a few seconds of voice recording. So we have to be very transparent. We also ensure a very high security in terms of data storage and data processing. This is also very important. Otherwise, we would not get an approval from the different participants to share data with us.
Of course. And talking of sensitivity, I also noticed that for now you're collecting voice, but the idea is also to accompany it with video in order to see a bit more the fatigue and emotions. Is that true?
This is a midterm objective, is to increase the range of data we collect. We are starting with the voice because we have already a lot of information going through the voice in terms of health. But at some point, if you want to improve the diagnosis, the detection of symptoms, a video can be also very informative because you have the facial expressions, for instance. You can detect maybe in a more accurate fashion the mental health issues in people thanks to videos rather than just voice. So this is the next step.
And other next steps? What are your ambitious plans for later?
Now we have, I would say for the next 5 years, we will focus entirely on voice, identifying and validating vocal biomarkers in different conditions such as cancer, diabetes, and COVID-19, for instance. And then we will try to bring this into clinical practice. This is very important for me. I want that these vocal biomarkers are used by patients to improve their health and monitoring. But in the next maybe 5 to 10 years, we will try to progressively include other sources of information such as videos, and we will try to have the same approach, but with other raw data to work with, not just voice, but also videos, for instance.
Okay, so I'll be following you very closely because I think it's a very interesting and important field of research, and good luck with that. But before we say goodbye, I will, of course, ask you to answer the question that we've asked our listeners before. So what's the answer?
So the answer is usually a typical person with diabetes has to take up to 180 decisions per day related to the disease management and diabetes management. And it's a lot. Someone with diabetes has to think almost constantly about his or her disease, and he has to manage his daily lives according to the disease. And it can, for some people, lead to what we call diabetes distress or even diabetes burnout, which is a very important condition. And we have to make sure that we can ease the life of people with diabetes thanks to digital technologies. And I'm really convinced that with voice, we can help them to improve their day-to-day disease management.
Yes, 180, that's a lot. I also read that it's counted as 600 hours per year.
Per year, exactly. This is pretty much the same number I have. And it's a lot, just managing the disease on their own, and they are only seeing up to 6 hours per year diabetologist or clinical practitioner, and the rest of the time they just have to manage their disease on their own, and it's very, very demanding.
Absolutely, and also needs a lot of support from the closer family, because I have some people with diabetes in my family, and it can get on our nerves sometimes, I have to say, because it's always like, okay, are we eating now? Not, because I have to plan my dose and everything, and it's always that kind of factor. Okay, we can't go for a trip because then my insulin and whatever. So it's really, really important. Yeah. So that was very, very interesting. Thank you very much for joining. I hope this is not the last time we're going to discuss all the research that you're doing at Luxembourg Institute of Health, because I have a lot of questions about phenotyping, about so many different things you're doing. Also, I would like to inform our listeners, I tried joining yesterday, so it is possible to listen to the webinars that you're organizing on Was that yesterday? No, 2 days ago, on Tuesdays, right? The webinars. Can you tell us a little bit more about the webinars? What are they about?
Sure. Our Department of Precision Health at the Luxembourg Institute of Health is organizing every Tuesday a webinar series on precision public health. And we are discussing various topics on public health, epidemiology, clinical research. And the next one, next Tuesday, is about digital health and AI. And I will have the pleasure to chair this session. We will have a guest speaker from Switzerland. We'll talk about digital epidemiology. And we will have also experts from LIH to talk about their research. So yeah, please feel free to join. It's free. You will have access to the videos and you can listen to our researchers about this exciting topic.
And from my side, I can add also that it's not just research speak and jargon. There are also some of the participants I listened to are really good communicators. So it was very interesting because there were also explanations that let me understand certain research. So just don't be afraid. Don't think that this is only for specialists.
No, it's very much accessible and everybody can understand what we are talking about.
So once again, thank you very much. Our guest today was Dr. Guy Fagherazzi.
Thanks for having me.
And this is it for today. I hope you enjoyed the show, this different approach to SciLux with an interview. In case you really want to check out the next interviews, remember to follow us, to subscribe, go to Twitter, Facebook, or just the SciLux Buzzsprout account. And let me just remind you as well that you can learn more about CoLive project at colivevoice.org website. And I will also share this link in my show notes as well, other information that we discussed today during the interview. Thank you very much. My name is Hanna Siemaszko, and this was SciLux.